Yeah, Max?
Nobody else has a question. I'll ask a very quick one. Two actually. Why is North Korea not talking to you? And then second, what is the case that you would put to North Korea? What are some of the reasons that you would tell North Korea why they should join the CPT?
Sure. Any other questions that we can take? Sure, Francesca?
Thank you. Nasir, could you explain to us how do you think the newly launched agenda of the UN Secretary General on disarmament would help strengthen the position of the CPTO at all? And also, I would like you to comment on this decision of Gutierrez to actually make available his office for strategic dialogue among nuclear weapon states. And is it something that you guys can tap into as the UN moves to become more political and more involved in strategic negotiations?
Another one, and then I'll answer straight.
Yeah, and a third one? 2, 3 at once? Anybody?
Okay, let me.
Okay, Sarah, yes?
So at least if you listen to North Korean rhetoric, the whole reason why they decided to develop nuclear weapons is because they feel threatened by the hostile attitude of the United States towards North Korea. So how can we make a case to North Korea to sign and hopefully ratify the CTBT when the US and also China have not ratified this treaty? Thank you.
Okay. So I'll start by that one because it's easier.
I'll start by the third question. I think why would we get North Korea to sign or ratify the CTBT if China and US haven't done so? In fact, that was one of my first statements, that in the context of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, it has to be the US, China, and DPRK platform, whereby in trying to build the confidence that is necessary to move forward, that North Korea will be brought to at least be at the same level as in the midterm plan, they could consider the ratification of the CTBT, all three of them. But I mean, it's easy to say than to do, okay? DPRK is in need of security, and that's what they say. They feel threatened. If they feel threatened, we need to help them and we need to build confidence in a way where they say, okay, we do not need this anymore. You will be surprised, you know, after the summit, what I heard when I was at the African Union, at the Tana Security Forum, many people came to me, young people, young African students, or scientists or policymakers. They told me, but look, Mr. Zerbo, now we know what the world is about. If you want to be respected, you need nuclear weapon. And that's a dangerous perception that we have to deal with right now. It might not be that perception that might not be that tangible in this part of the world. But in Africa, in the developing world, this is what people see now. They say, okay, if you want nuclear weapon, if you want to be respected, you need nuclear weapon. And you will be shocked. Some will tell me, look, maybe Iran should, so that people will respect them. But how do you come about to helping those young students and experts to think and feel differently than perceiving the world only around nuclear weapon and the need to have it to be respected? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, not by us here only, but by the leaders of this world, to know that out there people have different perception, different understanding of what we show them. And I don't think in the North, the inter-Korean discussion or the US DPRK discussion that anyone wanted to give that perception. But unfortunately, we can't stop people from thinking or taking things the way they do. And this is what I got when I went to the Tana Forum. And this is what I get when I talk to people in universities in Africa and in Latin America. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a work of getting countries regionally to understand each other, to not feel threatened by each other, to be united so that they can move together and then contribute to international peace and security. I've heard like many of you, Kim Jong-un saying that he doesn't want to be like Gaddafi. That's one thing that he said. But when he says he doesn't want to be like Gaddafi, what is he referring to? He's referring to not putting his nuclear weapon on the table and then say, I've given up my nuclear weapon, and then now I'm so threatened that the fate of Gaddafi is now mine. So how do we get this to change? I think it depends on the international community, and that's why having one of the points that they made was they don't want the military exercise at their border as a first start in the negotiation. And then the other part will say, no, we need that because that's the only pressure that we can put them. So we have this difficulty where one side say this, and then the other side say, no, this is the way we want. So there's a lot of work to be done. And what can I tell the DPRK to join the CTBT? I mean, I will start by saying that they're the only country that is not following the international norm today. And if you want to be part of this movement, part of this momentum that Secretary General Guterres mentioned yesterday, he said we need a disarmament momentum to move forward for a world free of nuclear weapons. And that's what he said he will work to, and that leads me to Francesca's question, which is the UN Secretary General agenda. Yesterday, I went to Secretary General Guterres and then told him that was a great speech. I think it's the first time I saw Secretary General Guterres taking the disarmament and non-proliferation issue in such a tangible way, and mentioning exactly his readiness to work with all international organizations to move this agenda forward. And also taking the CTBT issue, because this hasn't been the case. Not because he didn't, because simply, as I said, the CTBT is not that tangible. And for a new Secretary General, it wasn't easy to grasp this idea. I think the nuclear weapon ban was more tangible than banning nuclear testing. But I think Secretary General has shown to the international community yesterday that he has grasped well enough this issue of non-proliferation and disarmament and shown his readiness. I think he was brave enough to show what he's intent to do, and then to tell the international community that this is the only way forward. He basically said the world is at the brink of a nuclear war. He's not the first one to say it. Secretary Perry wrote a book on it, and that's something that he mentioned yesterday. And he also said that coming to Nagasaki was humbling enough for him to know that something needs to be done to end nuclear weapon from this planet. And that he's ready to work with Japan, he's ready to work with the international community. And what we get from that as well, and that's what I say, I urge all of you to have this experience of a peace memorial in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. It makes things completely different after you leave from that place. You understand the world differently, and it probably gives you a sense of energy, a sense of moral obligation to work to put an end to nuclear weapon. And I think that's a feeling that I got from Secretary Guterres yesterday, and I think his visit to Nagasaki will make a difference in his agenda for non-proliferation and disarmament. And the other question was, no, I think I've covered all. I think I've covered all.
So he asked why not we ever want to talk to
Max's question on why the DPRK is conversing with the organization.
Ah, yeah, okay. Why the DPRK is not conversing with the organization? I mean, they're not conversing because they still want to do testing. And the only organization. That's probably what it was. I think if you intend to test, I mean, why would you talk to the organization that stopped nuclear weapon testing? I think that's as simple as this. But I think the question is, why aren't we conversing with them? Because one thing is for them to not come to us, but I've always been an advocate of going to even those who are not ready to talk to you. And that's why I was talking about the difficulty in multilateral diplomacy. Because you may want to go, but state that our party to your treaty will tell you that's not the timing. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we work for 183 countries, and they're the one governing our way of doing, and our life, and then our marching order. And the time wasn't right for us to talk to them officially. I don't think I could have asked directly to the DPRK that I want to pay a visit to Pyongyang to talk about the CTBT. I wish I could, because I think you'll be surprised. Sometimes, you know, informal discussion like that can make a huge difference. And then, you know, I'm from a developing country, and I know that sometimes people just need your eye to look at them differently for them to follow you in your way of doing things. Maybe that's what they're looking for. This way of saying that they need security, the security can just come from the perception of that feeling that they might see that people count with them and people respect them. It's all about respect and dignity. And maybe they're also frustrated that we're not contacting them, who knows? But I'm counting on Anton Klapkov in his contact with the DPRK.
We'll have the conference next year.
The conference next year, that's what you said, and then I've already booked my time to be at the conference. And I hope it won't just be an informal discussion, it will be an official discussion with the DPRK. This is what I hope.
Great. If I could just add to that, I think also, you know, from the DPRK's recent statements about joining the international ban on testing, one of the things that we're trying to advocate for on a policy level is to get them to actually explicitly mention the treaty. So once we start to see a change in the discourse, perhaps that's a metric that we can use in terms of when we field invitations, how we organize as an organization. But we need to get them to mention the CTBT explicitly, you know. Yeah, so, and any additional questions?
I have a question. Yeah, I am mentioning the CTBT. Sahel is getting, I mean, if you look at all the statements yesterday at Nagasaki or even Hiroshima, you will hardly hear ending nuclear testing. It's all about the weapon ban treaty. It's all about the weapon ban treaty because that's what people see, and that's what people feel in Japan. Japan, it wasn't about testing. Kazakhstan was about testing. And I think when Kazakhstan and Japan were co-chair of the Article 14 of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, I think pushing the treaty for its entry into force, that was the best mix that one could get. One that has suffered nuclear testing, and the other one that has suffered nuclear weapon, the use of nuclear weapon, to advocate for the CTBT and then for the NPT. But I was shocked when there was a discussion at the UN Security Council, chaired by the president of Kazakhstan, that no one that day mentioned the CTBT. They talk about the Biological Weapon Convention, the Chemical Weapon Convention, the NPT. They talk about, you know, the overall disarmament framework, and there was no mention of CTBT. And this is where I talk about moral obligation. There should be no opportunity or no missed opportunity for both Kazakhstan and Japan not to talk about the entry into force of the CTBT or the implementation of the NPT. Because if they don't, who else on earth is best placed to talk about that? They carry that moral obligation that they have to share with the rest of the international community to move the disarmament and non-proliferation agenda forward. And we all have to push them to do. We have to put that responsibility on their shoulder. Because if they take it, they can make wonders with regard to disarmament and non-proliferation. And this is what civil society is waiting for Japan. My discussion with Foreign Minister Kono was, yes, I know that this readiness to go immediately for the weapon ban treaty is not an easy task for Japan. But then bring the CTBT. Bring the necessity and the urgency of the entry into force of the CTBT wherever you are. And that's what Foreign Minister Kono is doing. And I want to thank him because since he took office, he hasn't spared any effort in mentioning the necessity and the urgency of the entry into force of the CTBT, even in the US context. And he did it in China, he did it in the US. And we need that. We cannot go to North Korea and ask them to denuclearize fully if they don't see us moving and others moving towards that direction, which is promoting non-proliferation and disarmament. And that's what they need. That's part of the security that they want as well. And we have to all work for that and then all try and push this agenda for the best of the international community, for the best of the CTBT, for the best of the youth group.
And maybe that's a good pitch. You know, later this month, the youth group will be convening in Kazakhstan and will be visiting the test site and also kind of outlining some strategic priorities for the next year. And one of them is exactly this. You know, as young people through the youth group, we're organizing how to better message so that we can interact with the ban treaty community because you know, we were on the delegation of CTBT delegation to NPT PrepCom in Geneva in April, and the ban treaty community occupies a lot of the space there in terms of the discourse. So we need to better work with them. So you know, if there's any ban treaty advocates in the audience that are young, you know, we need to make those linkages. And Dr. Zerbo, by supporting the youth group initiative and you know, ensuring that it's funded and has different platforms to actually meet, we're making a lot of progress. So we invite everybody who's young in the audience to join the youth group.
But everybody's young.
Everybody's young. There's actually no official age cap on the youth group, so.
It's from 1 to 77.
Now there's an official age cap on the youth group.
No, what I wanted to say, you know, it's so great to be with young people, and when I mention opportunities, Sair will join me in my bilateral meeting in Seoul. I remember, I think till last night, we were arguing with, to say that Sair is a CTBT staff, because they were taking him as a student, as a youth group member. But the beauty, having young people like Sair being part of those high official meetings, is the experience and opportunity that he takes to share with his fellow youth group members. And that's what I'm trying to advocate, because life is all about opportunity. If you don't get this opportunity to sit at high-level meetings, I mean, you sit there to see what those folks are talking about, to see also if they're clever enough to take issues of international, because that's what it is. Because sometimes we sit and forget what is essential, and then tend to go into different directions. And you guys tend to bring us to the reality, and that's what is so good to have you. And I'm happy to have you tomorrow, I mean, in the next couple of days in our official meeting in Seoul. And I wish you guys, some of you will have the same opportunity, not only with the CTBT, but wherever you go and wherever you work, because it's wonderful to experience this.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Said said we have to run, so sorry.